The stars twisted and bent as 2,000 warships tore through the fabric of space. They emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the dark purple metal of the Valorith Dominion. For 300 years, this fleet had brought entire civilizations to their knees. Today, they had come for a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. High Commander Zyrith Voss stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Subjugation. He was tall, even by Valorith standards, with gray scaled skin and 4 eyes that glowed with a soft orange light. His clawed hands rested behind his back as he watched the display screens fill with data about this new system. "Report," he commanded. His tactical officer, a younger Valorith named Keth, pulled up the information. "We have arrived beyond the 8th planet, Commander. The target world is the 3rd from the star. Initial scans show a population of approximately 8 billion. Technology level is primitive. They have basic space capability but have only reached their single moon. No planetary shield. No orbital defense platforms. No unified government." Voss made a sound of amusement deep in his throat. "Another easy conquest. How many times have we done this, Keth? This will be the 12th system claimed for the Dominion under your command, sir. And it will be the easiest." Voss walked closer to the main viewing window. In the distance, barely visible, was a tiny blue dot. "Look at them, fighting among themselves, destroying their own world with pollution and war. They do not even know we exist." The Valorith had watched this species for nearly a century. They had intercepted their radio signals, studied their broadcasts, learned their languages. They knew everything about human history. The wars, the genocides, the nuclear weapons they had built and pointed at each other. The Valorith saw humans as violent, primitive creatures who would either submit to Dominion rule or be wiped from existence. What the Valorith did not know was that humans had been watching them too. 63 years ago, a human research station had detected the first Valorith scout ship passing through the outer solar system. The governments of Earth had panicked at first. Then they had done something remarkable. They had come together in secret. They had shared technology and resources. They had built things that the rest of the galaxy would never suspect, and they had waited, deep beneath the mountains of Switzerland, in a bunker that officially did not exist. Admiral Yuki Tanaka sat in front of a wall of screens. She was 62 years old, with short gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen too many classified files. She had spent her entire adult life preparing for this moment. A young officer ran into the room. "Admiral, we have confirmation. The alien fleet has entered the system. Over 2,000 ships." Tanaka took a slow breath. Her heart was beating fast, but her face showed nothing. "Activate Protocol Lighthouse. Send the signal to all SolGuard installations." "Yes, Admiral." Within minutes, messages were traveling across the solar system through channels that no alien technology could detect. On Mars, hidden bases received the alert. Inside hollowed-out asteroids, crews woke from their stations and began powering up weapons that had sat dormant for decades. On the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, soldiers checked their equipment and said quiet prayers. Humanity was not going to surrender. Humanity was going to fight. But first, they were going to lie. Admiral Tanaka picked up a red phone and spoke to the leaders of every major nation on Earth. "Begin the performance," she said. "Make it convincing." Over the next several days, the Valorith Armada moved deeper into the solar system. They destroyed the satellites that Earth had publicly launched. These were old things with weak weapons, and the Valorith crushed them without effort. They laughed at the primitive nuclear missiles that flew toward them and bounced harmlessly off their shields. On Earth, television stations broadcast scenes of panic. World leaders appeared on screen, begging for mercy. Cities seemed to fall into chaos as people fled into the countryside, radio signals filled with desperate pleas for peace. Commander Voss watched all of this with satisfaction. "They break so easily," he said. "Send a message to their leaders. Tell them we will accept their complete surrender. All resistance must end. All weapons must be handed over. All governments must bow to the Dominion." The humans agreed to everything. Within 72 hours, Earth had officially surrendered. Commander Voss smiled his sharp-toothed smile and ordered the invasion transports to begin their descent. 500 ships broke from the main fleet and headed toward the planet below. The rest of the Armada settled into orbit around Earth, their shields lowered, their crews celebrating. None of them noticed the strange readings from the asteroid belt. None of them wondered why so many of Earth's satellites had unusual power signatures. None of them questioned why the surrender had come so quickly. In her bunker, Admiral Tanaka watched the enemy fleet spread out around her world. She watched the invasion transports fall through the atmosphere like metal rain. She watched and waited until the perfect moment. Then she opened a channel to every human asset in the solar system. "All units, this is Solgard Actual," she said. Her voice was calm and cold. "The enemy is in position. Weapons free. I repeat, weapons free." On Mars, massive doors slid open in the red dust, revealing railgun batteries the size of skyscrapers. In the asteroid belt, 100 rocks that the Valorith had dismissed as natural formations suddenly came alive with fusion drives and targeting systems. Around Jupiter, carriers that had been hiding in the radiation shadows of the giant planet launched thousands of attack drones. And on Earth, in every city that the Valorith transports approached, the panicking civilians stopped running. They turned around. They revealed the weapons they had been hiding. They smiled. Commander Voss was reviewing supply reports when his tactical officer screamed, "Commander, we are detecting massive energy signatures across the entire system. Weapons fire incoming from..." Keth looked at his screen in disbelief. From everywhere. The first tungsten rod hit the Valorith cruiser Proud Conqueror at 12% of the speed of light. The ship did not explode. It simply stopped existing. One moment it was there. The next moment it was a cloud of expanding atoms. And that was just the beginning. Commander Voss gripped the railing of his bridge as his fleet began to die around him. On the screens, he watched ship after ship vanish in balls of fire and light. His officers were shouting. Alarms were screaming. And for the first time in his 300 years of conquest, Zyreth Voss understood that he had made a terrible mistake. The humans had not surrendered. The humans had been hunting them from the very beginning. 3 days before the trap closed, the people of Earth had played their roles perfectly. Maria Santos was a schoolteacher in Buenos Aires. She had known about the aliens for 15 years, ever since her government had chosen her for the civilian defense program. On the day the Valorith demanded surrender, she stood in front of a camera and cried. She begged for her children. She pleaded with the invaders to show mercy. It was the best acting performance of her life. When the cameras stopped rolling, Maria wiped her tears and walked down into the basement of her school. There, hidden behind a false wall, was an armory filled with weapons that could punch holes through alien armor. She checked her rifle, kissed the photo of her daughter, and waited. All around the world, billions of people did the same thing. The Valorith believed what they wanted to believe. They saw a weak species, divided and afraid. They saw easy prey. They did not understand that humans had spent their entire history fighting each other, and that this had taught them things no peaceful civilization could ever learn. Humans knew how to lie. Humans knew how to hide. Humans knew how to wait for the perfect moment to strike. Commander Voss stood on the bridge of the eternal subjugation and watched his invasion transports descend toward Earth. Each transport carried 5,000 Valorith soldiers, warriors bred for conquest and trained since birth. They expected to meet scattered resistance at best. "The landing zones are clear," reported his ground forces commander through the communication system. "We are beginning deployment in the major population centers." "Excellent," Voss replied. "Begin pacification immediately. I want this planet under full control within 1 week." He turned away from the screen, already thinking about his report to the Dominion High Council. Another successful conquest, another species brought to heel. His name would be spoken with respect for generations. Far above, in the cold darkness of space, Admiral Tanaka watched everything from her command center. Her screens showed the positions of every alien ship in the system. She knew exactly where they were, how strong their shields were, and when they were most vulnerable. The Valorith had lowered their shields. They were celebrating. They thought the war was already over. "Status report," Tanaka said. Her operations officer pulled up the tactical display. "All enemy capital ships are in Earth orbit. Shields are at minimum power across the fleet. The invasion transports have entered atmosphere and are approaching landing zones. Mars batteries are charged and ready. Asteroid fleet is in position. Jupiter strike groups are standing by." Tanaka nodded slowly. 63 years of preparation. 63 years of secrets and sacrifice. Thousands of scientists and soldiers who had given their lives to build this moment. She thought about all of them now. She hoped she would make them proud. "Send the signal to Earth ground forces," she said. "Tell them to begin the welcome." In Buenos Aires, Maria Santos heard her earpiece click 3 times. That was the signal. She led her team out of the school basement and into the streets. Above them, a massive Valorith transport ship was descending toward the city center. Its engines roared like thunder. Its shadow covered entire neighborhoods. Maria raised her rifle and smiled. "Welcome to Earth," she whispered. The transport landed in the Plaza de Mayo. Its doors opened, and Valorith soldiers poured out, their weapons ready. They expected to find terrified civilians hiding in buildings. They expected easy surrender. Instead, they found hell. From every window, every rooftop, every doorway, weapons fire erupted. Human soldiers in civilian clothes opened fire with weapons that should not have existed on a primitive world. Plasma bolts and armor-piercing rounds tore through the Valorith ranks. Explosions rocked the landing zone. The Valorith soldiers tried to fight back. They were strong and fast and well-trained, but they were surrounded. They were outnumbered, and they were facing an enemy that had no intention of taking prisoners. The same scene played out in cities across the planet: New York, Tokyo, London, Mumbai, Cairo. Every major city became a killing ground. The Valorith had expected to conquer a helpless population. Instead, they had walked into the largest ambush in human history. High Commander Voss stared at his screens in disbelief. Red warning lights flashed everywhere. Casualty reports poured in from the surface. His ground forces were being slaughtered. "This is impossible," he growled. "They surrendered. They had no weapons." "Commander!" His tactical officer's voice was sharp with fear. "We are detecting massive weapons fire from—" He never finished the sentence. The first railgun round from Mars struck the Valorith battleship Dominion's Fury. The ship was 3 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to destroy a continent. It died in less than a second. The tungsten projectile, moving at 36,000 kilometers per second, punched through the ship from stem to stern. The Dominion's Fury exploded in a ball of white fire that briefly outshone the sun. Then came the second round, and the third, and the 100th. From the asteroid belt, the hidden fleet emerged. These were not the clumsy, primitive ships the Valorith had expected. These were warships built in secret over decades, armed with weapons designed specifically to kill Valorith technology. They came out of the darkness like sharks smelling blood. Around Jupiter, carriers launched swarms of AI-guided drones. Each drone was small enough to fit through a doorway, fast enough to dodge point defense fire, and smart enough to find the weak points in any shield system. They fell upon the Valorith fleet like angry insects. Commander Voss grabbed his tactical officer by the shoulder. "Raise shields. All ships, raise shields now." But it was too late for many of them. In the first 60 seconds of the battle, humanity destroyed 400 Valorith ships. 400 vessels, each crewed by thousands, simply ceased to exist. The survivors raised their shields and began to fight back. Valorith plasma cannons were powerful weapons. They struck back at the human fleet with devastating force. Human ships died too. The carrier UES Defiance took a direct hit and broke apart, killing 3,000 sailors in an instant. But the humans did not stop. They did not retreat. They pushed harder. Admiral Tanaka watched the battle unfold on her screens. Every death hurt her. Every lost ship was a wound in her heart. But she did not look away. She could not afford to. "Focus fire on their command ships," she ordered. "Take out their leadership. Break their formation." The human fleet obeyed. They concentrated their attacks on the largest Valorith vessels, the ones that coordinated the others. One by one, the command ships fell. On the surface of Earth, the ground battle raged on. Valorith soldiers fought with desperate courage, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. For every human who fell, 10 more took their place. This was their home. This was their world. They would die before they let it be taken. Commander Voss stood alone on his bridge as his officers worked frantically around him. His fleet was dying. His soldiers were dying. Everything he had built, everything he had conquered, was falling apart. "How?" he whispered to himself. "How did they hide all of this?" He thought about the human broadcasts he had watched. The wars, the chaos, the division. It had all been so convincing. And then he understood. The humans had not been showing their weakness. They had been showing their strength. A species that could fight so brutally against itself could fight even more brutally against an outside enemy. A species that had invented nuclear weapons and biological warfare and chemical attacks was not a primitive species. It was the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and Commander Voss had just poked it with a stick. The battle for the Sol system entered its 6th hour, and the void of space burned with the light of dying ships. Captain James Okonkwo gripped the arms of his command chair as his destroyer, the UES Relentless, dove toward a cluster of Valorith cruisers. His ship was small compared to the enemy vessels. It was fast and deadly, built for exactly this kind of fight. Targeting solutions locked, his weapons officer reported. All missile tubes ready. Fire everything, Okonkwo ordered. 40 missiles streaked away from the Relentless. They were smart weapons, each one carrying a small AI that could think and adapt. The Valorith point defense guns tried to shoot them down, but the missiles twisted and dodged like living things. 26 of them found their targets. 3 Valorith cruisers exploded in quick succession. The Relentless was already turning away, its engines at full power, heading for the next group of enemies. This was the human way of war. Fast, brutal, relentless. Commander Voss watched the battle from his flagship and felt his hope dying. His fleet had regrouped after the initial shock. His surviving ships had raised their shields and were fighting back with all their considerable firepower. But it was not enough. The humans were everywhere. They attacked from every direction at once. When the Valorith concentrated their defenses on one threat, 3 more appeared somewhere else. It was like fighting shadows. "We have lost 600 ships," Keth reported. His voice was shaking. "Another 400 are badly damaged. Commander, we must retreat. Retreat." In 300 years of service, Voss had never retreated. The Valorith Dominion did not retreat. They conquered. They dominated. They crushed their enemies beneath their boots. But these enemies would not be crushed. "All ships, form up around the flagship," Voss ordered. "We will fight our way out of this system and return with a larger force. The Dominion will not forget this insult." The surviving Valorith ships began to pull back from Earth orbit. They grouped together in a defensive formation, their shields overlapping, their weapons pointed outward. Slowly, they started moving toward the edge of the system, toward the point where they could jump to faster-than-light travel and escape. Admiral Tanaka saw this on her screens and nodded to herself. This was expected. This was planned for. "Signal the asteroid fleet," she said. "Begin the pursuit. Do not let them reach the transit point." From the belt of rocks between Mars and Jupiter, human warships emerged in force. There were 200 of them, each one built for long-range combat. They had been waiting for this moment, saving their ammunition, resting their crews. Now they joined the hunt. On Earth, the ground battle was reaching its end. The Valorith invasion force had been nearly wiped out. Only scattered groups remained, fighting desperately in ruins of cities they had never managed to conquer. Human soldiers closed in on them without mercy. In Buenos Aires, Maria Santos led her team through the shattered streets. They had been fighting for hours. She had lost 7 friends already. Her rifle was hot in her hands and her body ached with exhaustion. But she did not stop. A group of Valorith soldiers had taken shelter in a collapsed building. There were maybe 20 of them left, wounded and afraid. They had stopped shooting. They were calling out in their strange language, words that the translation software in Maria's earpiece rendered as pleas for mercy. Maria thought about mercy. She thought about the 11 star systems the Valorith had conquered. She thought about the billions of beings they had enslaved and killed. She thought about what they would have done to her daughter if they had won. "No," she said quietly. "Not today." She gave the order, and her team moved in. In space, the Valorith fleet was struggling to escape. The human ships were faster and more maneuverable. They struck at the edges of the Valorith formation, picking off wounded ships, wearing down shields, never giving the enemy a moment to rest. The eternal subjugation took a direct hit from a railgun round. The shot did not penetrate the shield, but the impact shook the entire vessel. Warning alarms screamed. Lights flickered. "Shield integrity at 60%. An officer reported. "Another hit like that and we will be vulnerable." Voss clenched his clawed hands. They were still millions of kilometers from the transit point. At this rate, they would never make it. "Launch all remaining fighters," he ordered. "Everything we have. Create a screen between us and the enemy. Hundreds of small Valorith attack craft poured out of the surviving carriers. They formed a wall of metal and weapons between the fleet and the pursuing humans. It was a desperate move. Those pilots would not survive, but it might buy enough time for the capital ships to escape. The human drones met the Valorith fighters in a swirling chaos of fire and death. Explosions lit up the darkness like new stars being born. Ships on both sides died by the dozens, then the hundreds. Captain Okonkwo pushed the Relentless through the edge of the battle. His ship had taken damage. His crew was tired. He had lost friends today, people he had served with for years. But he could see the Valorith flagship on his sensors, and he was not going to let it get away. Navigation. Calculate an intercept course, he ordered. Weapons. Prepare a full spread of torpedoes. Captain, his first officer said carefully. That course will take us through the heart of the enemy formation. Our chances of survival are, I know what they are. Okonkwo turned to face his crew. They were young, most of them. They had trained their whole lives for this war, but nothing could truly prepare someone for the reality of combat. He saw the fear in their eyes. He also saw the determination. The Valorith have conquered 11 star systems, he said. Billions of people are living as slaves right now because no one could stop them. Today, we can stop them. Today, we can show the galaxy that there are still people willing to fight. He paused. I will not order any of you to follow me, but I am going after that flagship. Who is with me? Every hand on the bridge went up. Okonkwo smiled. Then let us show them what humans are made of. The Relentless accelerated toward the enemy fleet. Valorith weapons fire filled the space around them. Shields flared and buckled. The hull groaned under the stress. But the ship kept going. They broke through the outer ring of defenders. They dodged between burning wreckage and spinning debris. They pushed closer and closer to the eternal subjugation. Commander Voss saw them coming. One small ship, damaged and alone, charging directly at his flagship. It was foolish. It was suicidal. It was terrifying. Destroy that ship, he shouted. Every weapon on the flagship turned toward the Relentless. The small destroyer vanished in a storm of plasma fire. For a moment, Voss thought it was over. Then the torpedoes emerged from the explosion. The Relentless had died, but its final attack kept going. 6 torpedoes, launched at the last possible moment, streaked toward the eternal subjugation. Point defense guns shot down 3 of them. 2 more hit the shields and detonated harmlessly. The 6th one found a gap. The explosion tore through the flagship's engine section. Alarms screamed. The ship lurched violently. Power systems failed across entire decks. Commander Voss picked himself up from the floor of his bridge. Around him, officers were dead or dying. Smoke filled the air. Through the cracked view screen, he could see the human fleet closing in. Engine status, he demanded. We have lost main propulsion. Someone answered. Emergency power only. We are adrift. Voss closed his 4 eyes. His ship was dying. His fleet was dying. And there was nothing he could do to stop it. For the first time in his long life, the High Commander of the Valorith Dominion understood that he had lost. The surviving Valorith ships fled toward the edge of the solar system like wounded animals running from a fire. There were less than 300 of them now, 300 ships out of the 2,000 that had arrived just days ago. The rest were wreckage, floating in clouds of debris around Earth and scattered across millions of kilometers of space. Commander Voss had transferred his flag to the battlecruiser Unyielding Will after the eternal subjugation lost power. The new ship was smaller and less comfortable, but it could still move. That was all that mattered now. How long until we reach the transit point? He demanded. His new tactical officer, a young female named Scylla, checked her instruments. At current speed, approximately 14 hours. Commander, 14 hours. Voss did not know if they had 14 hours. The human fleet was pursuing them without rest. Every few minutes, another Valorith ship would fall behind, its engines damaged or its shields failing, and the humans would swarm over it like predators taking down weak prey. Signal all ships, Voss ordered. Maximum speed. Leave behind anyone who cannot keep up. It was a cruel order. It meant abandoning wounded comrades to die. But Voss had no choice. If he stopped to help the stragglers, the humans would catch them all. The Valorith fleet pushed harder. Their engines strained. Their crews worked without sleep, trying to keep damaged systems running. Behind them, The human ships followed like patient hunters tracking a blood trail through snow. Admiral Tanaka watched the chase on her displays and felt a grim satisfaction. Everything was going according to plan. The Valorith were running exactly where she wanted them to run. They just did not know it yet. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "the enemy fleet is approaching the outer system marker. They will reach the transit point in approximately 13 hours. They will never make it," Tanaka said quietly. "Signal the Neptune station. Tell them to prepare the surprise." Far out in the darkness of the outer solar system, beyond the orbit of Neptune, humans had built a secret installation. It was not a weapon. It was something more subtle and more devastating. It was a transmitter designed to interfere with faster-than-light travel technology. The Valorith called their FTL drives rift engines. They worked by tearing a hole in space and slipping through to another location. It was elegant technology, far beyond anything humans had developed on their own. But humans were very good at breaking things. For 60 years, human scientists had studied captured Valorith technology. They had taken apart old scout ships that had wandered too close to Earth. They had analyzed every component, every circuit, every line of code. They had learned exactly how the rift engines worked, and they had built a device that could shut them down. Commander Voss did not know this. He thought escape was still possible. He thought that once his ships reached the transit point, they could jump away and warn the Dominion about what had happened. He thought there was still hope. 8 hours into the chase, that hope died. "Commander," Sila's voice was sharp with panic, "our rift engines are not responding. I am reading failures across the entire fleet." Voss felt cold. "What do you mean, not responding?" "The engine cores are active, but the navigation systems are receiving corrupted data. We cannot calculate a transit. None of our ships can." Voss stared at her. "That is impossible. Our systems are isolated. There is no way the humans could." And then he understood. The surrender. The communications they had exchanged with Earth during the fake surrender. The humans had sent something hidden in those messages. A virus. A piece of malicious code that had slipped past every security measure and buried itself deep in the Valorith computer systems. They had been infected from the very beginning. "Can we repair the damage?" Voss asked, already knowing the answer. Sila shook her head slowly. "The corruption is too deep. We would need to completely rebuild the navigation computers. That would take weeks, maybe months." Voss turned to the view screen. Behind them, still coming, was the human fleet. They were not in a hurry anymore. They knew their prey was trapped. "Signal all ships," Voss said. His voice was hollow now, empty of emotion. "Inform them of the situation. Tell them to prepare for a final stand. We will sell our lives dearly." There was no response from his officers. They simply stared at their screens, watching the end approach. The human fleet caught up to the Valorith survivors near the orbit of Pluto. The dwarf planet hung in the distance, a small, pale dot against the endless black. It would be the last thing many beings would ever see. Admiral Tanaka gave the order to attack. Human ships fell upon the trapped Valorith fleet without mercy. There was no negotiation, no offer of surrender, no chance for escape. This was not a battle anymore. It was an execution. The Valorith fought back. They were warriors, bred and trained for combat, and they did not surrender easily. Their weapons blazed against the darkness. Human ships died alongside Valorith vessels. The space around Pluto filled with fire and wreckage and floating bodies. But the outcome was never in doubt. One by one, the Valorith ships fell. The battlecruiser, Dominion's Pride, was surrounded by human destroyers and torn apart by concentrated fire. The carrier, Eternal Victory, was rammed by a human cruiser whose captain chose to die rather than let the enemy escape. The heavy cruiser, Conqueror's Dream, was destroyed by a swarm of drones that found a weakness in its shield generator. Commander Voss stood on the bridge of the Unyielding Will and watched his fleet disappear. Each explosion was another piece of his soul being torn away. These were his people, his responsibility, his failure. "Commander," Sila said softly, "we are the last capital ship. The humans are closing in." Voss looked at the tactical display. He could see them coming. Dozens of ships, moving slowly, taking their time. They knew he had nowhere to go. "Send a message to the Dominion homeworld," he ordered. "Tell them everything that happened here. Tell them about the human trap, about the hidden fleet, about the virus in our systems. Warn them never to come to this place again. Sila's clawed hands moved over her console. Then she stopped. Her 4 eyes went wide with horror. Commander, our Ansible array was destroyed in the first attack. We have had no communication with the homeworld since the battle began. No message has left this system. Voss felt the last piece of hope inside him shatter. The humans had thought of everything. They had destroyed long-range communications first, before the Valorith even knew they were under attack. There would be no warning. There would be no survivors. The Dominion would simply wait for a fleet that never returned, wondering what had happened, never knowing the truth. How? Voss whispered. How could a primitive species do this to us? Sila did not answer. There was nothing to say. The human fleet surrounded the unyielding will. Their weapons locked onto the last Valorith capital ship. On the bridge, Valorith officers said their final prayers to gods that had already abandoned them. Commander Voss straightened his uniform. He would die standing. That, at least, the humans could not take from him. You may have killed us, he said to no one, to everyone, to the universe itself. But the Dominion is vast. They will come looking for us. They will find this system. And then you will learn what true power is. The words felt hollow even as he spoke them. The first human torpedoes struck the unyielding will. The shields held for a moment, then collapsed. Fire tore through the ship. The bridge exploded around Commander Voss, and the last thing he saw was the cold light of distant stars. Then there was nothing at all. The unyielding will burned for 3 days before its reactor finally failed, and the ship went dark forever. It drifted in the cold space beyond Pluto, a tomb of metal and ash, carrying the bodies of Commander Voss and his crew into eternal silence. Around it floated the wreckage of 2,000 ships. The debris field stretched across millions of kilometers, a graveyard that would orbit the sun for thousands of years. Future generations would call it the Memorial Belt. They would come here to remember what happened, to pay respect to the dead on both sides, and to remind themselves why they must always be ready to fight. But that was in the future. For now, there was only the silence. Admiral Yuki Tanaka stood on the observation deck of her command ship and looked out at the field of destruction. She was exhausted. She had not slept in 4 days. Her body ached and her eyes burned and her heart felt like a stone in her chest. Humanity had won, but victory had come at a terrible price. 47 human ships had been destroyed in the battle. 12,000 men and women would never come home. They had died fighting for their planet, for their families, for the future of their species. Their names would be carved in monuments on every world humanity would ever touch. Admiral, a young officer approached her carefully. We have finished the final sweep. There are no Valorith survivors. The enemy fleet has been completely destroyed. Tanaka nodded slowly. What about our people? The search and rescue operations? We have recovered most of the escape pods. The medical ships are at full capacity. We saved everyone we could. Everyone we could. That phrase would haunt Tanaka for the rest of her life. It meant that some had been lost. Some had drifted too far, or their pods had been damaged, or they had simply run out of time. She would read their names later. She would write letters to their families. She would carry their memory with her always. Thank you, she said quietly. You are dismissed. The officer left, and Tanaka was alone with her thoughts. On Earth, the celebrations had already begun. The invasion force had been wiped out. The cities were damaged but not destroyed. Humanity had faced its greatest test and survived. People danced in the streets and hugged strangers and wept with relief. But Tanaka could not celebrate. She knew that this was only the beginning. Somewhere out in the galaxy, the Valorith Dominion waited for their fleet to return. They expected reports of another easy conquest, another species brought to heel, another system added to their empire. When those reports did not come, they would grow curious. Then they would grow worried. Then they would send scouts. And when those scouts found the graveyard around Earth's sun, they would bring back terrible news. The Dominion would learn that their invincible fleet had been destroyed by a species they had dismissed as primitive. They would learn that 2,000 ships and millions of soldiers had vanished into the void. They would learn that there was something in the Sol system that could kill them. What would they do then? Would they retreat in fear? Would they leave humanity alone, grateful to have escaped a dangerous enemy? No. Tanaka knew better. The Valorith were conquerors. They had built an empire on dominance and control. They could not allow such a defeat to go unanswered. Their pride would not permit it. Their power structure would not survive it. They would come back. And next time, they would bring everything they had. Tanaka turned away from the window and walked to the communication center. She had a speech to give. The people of Earth needed to hear from their leaders. They needed to understand what had happened and what was coming. The broadcast went out to every corner of the planet. Billions of people stopped what they were doing and listened as Admiral Tanaka appeared on their screens. People of Earth, she began. Today, we won a great victory. We faced an enemy that had conquered 11 star systems, and we destroyed them. We proved that humanity will not bow to tyrants. We proved that we will fight for our home, our families, and our freedom. She paused, letting the words settle. But I must be honest with you. This war is not over. The Valorith Dominion is vast and powerful. They will not accept what happened here. They will come again, with more ships, more soldiers, more weapons, and we must be ready. On screens across the world, people watched in silence. The joy of victory was fading now, replaced by something harder and colder. Understanding. For 63 years, we prepared in secret for this moment. We built hidden fleets and trained hidden armies. We hoped we would never need them, but we knew that someday, the galaxy would come knocking on our door. That day has arrived. Tanaka straightened her shoulders. I am asking all of you to prepare for what comes next. We must build more ships. We must train more soldiers. We must push our science and technology further than ever before. The enemy will not give us another 60 years. We may have only a few decades, or a few years, or a few months. We do not know. But I do know this. We are human. We have survived ice ages and plagues and world wars. We have climbed from caves to starships. We have faced extinction before, and we have always found a way to survive. This time will be no different. She looked directly into the camera. The Valorith thought we were prey. They thought we were weak, divided, primitive. They were wrong. We are the children of Earth, and we will defend our home until the last star burns out. The broadcast ended. Across the planet, people stood in silence for a long moment. Then they went back to work. On Mars, the reconstruction of the railgun batteries began. Engineers worked around the clock, building bigger weapons, stronger shields, faster ships. On the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, training camps expanded. Young people from every nation volunteered for military service. They knew what was coming. They wanted to be ready. In the asteroid belt, mining operations increased tenfold. Raw materials flowed toward the shipyards on Titan, where the skeletons of new warships were already taking shape. These would be larger than anything humanity had built before. Carriers, battleships, dreadnoughts, weapons of war on a scale the galaxy had never seen. And in a small office on Earth, Admiral Tanaka sat alone with a cup of cold coffee and a tablet full of names. 12,000 names. 12,000 lives given for victory. She read each one. She memorized each face. She would carry them with her into whatever came next. The galaxy had sent its hunters to Earth. Those hunters had found not prey, but predators. Not victims, but warriors. Not a dying species, but one that was only beginning to understand its own strength. Far away, beyond the edge of the solar system, the void remained silent. But it was not the silence of emptiness. It was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of waiting. The Valorith would come again. Other enemies would follow. The universe was vast and dark and full of dangers that humanity could not yet imagine. But Earth would be ready. The Sol system was humanity's home. It was where they had been born, where they had grown, where they had learned to reach for the stars. They would not surrender it. They would not abandon it. They would fight for it until the last human drew breath. And when the next enemy came, when the next fleet crossed into their space, humanity would be waiting. They had made this promise to themselves, to their children, to the universe itself. Anyone who entered the Sol system with hostile intent would never leave it alive. The stars were watching. The galaxy was listening. And somewhere in the darkness, something ancient and powerful was beginning to take notice of the small blue world that had just announced itself to the cosmos. The war for Earth was over. The war for everything else was just beginning.